All right, today we're diving into the harrowing first-person account from a man known only as the Buyer. He details a 5-month ordeal inside what he calls Blacksite Berlin, a penal psychiatry facility that he claims is really a secret prison run by operatives of an international deep state.
So how does a story like this even begin? You might think with some overt act of violence, but no. According to the Buyer's testimony, his torment started with something that seemed kind. A simple, compassionate gesture that he now believes was just the first move in a very long and calculated game.
Okay, so picture this. He's cold. A nurse comes to him and offers a cup of hot tea to warm him up. Something with flavor, which he hadn't had in a long time. Of course he accepts it. But just a half hour later, he finds himself completely out of it, heavily sedated in his bed. This, he says, was his real welcome to Blacksite Berlin.
And you have to understand, that cup of tea wasn't a one-off thing. It was just the beginning. The Buyer describes it as the start of a systematic campaign, a meticulously planned assault designed to break him down both physically and mentally, and to make sure he had absolutely no way out.
The process he describes is just terrifyingly methodical. First, he starts to realize his food is being drugged, especially the soups. So he thinks, okay, fine, I'll only drink sealed water bottles. He tries sparkling water, but soon that's tainted too. So he switches to still water. You can guess what happens next. That gets compromised as well. His last resort is the tap water, but he says even that eventually was poisoned. He was completely and totally trapped.
And the assault wasn't just chemical. He also describes relentless physical torture. We're talking 5 straight months, right through the dead of winter. The floor heating in his cell turned off. The air conditioning blasting cold air at full tilt. And all he had to wear was a thin, knee-length smock. He was left to just constantly shiver.
Now, as his body weight just plummeted, down towards 50 kilograms, that's about 110 pounds, he says the staff's tactics got, well, bizarre. They started trying to chemically make him gain weight. He was offered cortisone for a minor issue. He discovered a chemical rubbed into his towel that made his skin feel instantly thicker. He even found a substance in the shower gel that did the same thing. It was a really strange and disturbing turn.
So, when poisoning his food and water wasn't enough, the Buyer claims his captors turned to a new weapon, the very air in his isolation cell. And for him, this was a terrifying escalation.
He actually identified 2 different types of gas. There was the day gas, which he says came from an atomizer in the monitoring room and was piped through a vent. The goal was to keep him in a state of constant, low-level sedation. But then came the night gas. This was different. A strong, sweet-smelling agent pumped through the bathroom's AC unit, powerful enough to knock him out completely.
And this torment wasn't just physical. It was deeply psychological. He describes one guard he nicknamed the Penguin, who would allegedly just stand at the observation window while the gas was being pumped in, mocking him as he struggled to breathe. And then, somehow, the situation got even worse. He was moved to a smaller, more suffocating cell. This one had no ventilation, no toilet. In that confined space, the gas was so much more concentrated. He describes it as the true hell, a torment so unbearable that for the first time in his entire life, it pushed him to think about suicide just to make it stop. You see, that night gas, the knockout agent, it had the most sinister purpose of all. After being knocked unconscious, the Buyer would wake up and find horrifying evidence of what had happened while he was helpless. He actually compared the discovery to something out of a Dracula film. He describes this one particular morning. He wakes up with a severe hangover, a splitting headache. He feels incredibly weak. As he tries to stand up, he nearly collapses. His vision just goes black from circulatory problems.
When he finally makes it to the mirror, he's shocked by what he sees. There's a massive triangular bruise on his forehead that perfectly matches the corner of his concrete bed. Then, a sharp pain in his leg leads him to another discovery. A large, oval bruise on his thigh with a clear, unmistakable needle mark right in the center.
So he starts putting the pieces together. The knockout gas, the bruise on his head, the needle mark, and that extreme physical weakness. It all pointed to one terrifying conclusion in his mind, that operatives were coming into his cell at night and forcibly taking large amounts of his blood. And he believes it happened more than once. So the big question became, why? Why would anyone need large quantities of his blood? This led him to piece together what he doesn't call a theory, but a conspiracy fact, a chilling, elaborate purpose behind everything he was being put through.
Here is the 4-step plan he believes he uncovered. First, collect his blood. Second, after he's released, stage some kind of fatal explosion where no body could possibly be recovered. Third, use the blood they collected to identify the so-called remains and have him declared legally dead. And the final step, the endgame? Allow third parties to make an illegal claim on his significant assets, which are all tied to something called the World Succession Deed.
But there was another, truly insidious layer to this plan. He realized that the constant poisoning and gassing were meant to make him complain. I mean, who wouldn't? But every time he did, his very real complaints were twisted and documented as evidence of paranoia, of persecution delusions. It was the perfect trap to create the legal grounds to forcibly medicate him and discredit him completely. After 5 long months of this ordeal, the buyer emerged, and he describes himself as a physical wreck. But his spirit, he says, was anything but broken.
And the moment he was moved back to his original cell, his defiance turned into action. He immediately spotted a new, tiny spy camera they'd installed to watch the blind spots in his bathroom. He just calmly chewed up some toilet paper and plugged the hole. Then he used more wet toilet paper to block the AC vent, the one they used for the night gas.
And this really shows you the paradox of his account. Physically, he was destroyed, emaciated down to 50 kilos, with long hair and nails, wearing a single filthy smock. But mentally, he claims he was sharper and more defiant than ever. He was convinced he had figured out their plan, and he was ready to fight.
Ultimately, by publishing his story, the buyer believes he has already sabotaged the whole thing. The plan needed his silence. He ends his account with a provocative question, aimed directly at his alleged captors. What happens when the victim of your perfect plan refuses to stay silent?